I'm going to record this event as well, so please be aware if your camera is on or if you speak, you will appear in the recording of our event this evening. The issue of Touchpoint that we just finished and what we're holding the event on tonight is about service design implementation. This was, I think, one of really the good issues that I've worked on and seen come to production. I heard Greg, who is one of our guest editors and who will have a few words to say later, also say some super positive things about it last week. And I hope for you that have been on the call, we've got some authors I'll introduce in a moment, and some of our guest editors also found that experience of both participating and reading the content useful. Let me see what else I have in here. So we've got three of our guest editors here, Christian Comandi, or Christian, Erico, I haven't seen him come in, but Erico's from Brazil. He was also a guest editor. And Greg, who sits on the SDN leadership team as well, was a guest editor. And as I said, Tina Weiser, who would have been with us, but who's not well, edited the issue. We've also lucky to have four of the authors who are going to share the content of their articles and short presentations with us today. Those are Shreya, Kata, Alex, and John. And what we're going to do is typically we'll start with a bit of actually Greg's experience as a guest editor of the issue. He, as you may know, we choose guest editors for each issue of Touchpoint, and their role is to actually coach some authors through the process, get involved in editing articles, and Greg will share a few words on his experience of the issue. And then we're going to hear from the four authors that I mentioned before. Each of them will give a short presentation. Please, if you have questions during the presentations and in the roundtable discussion that happens afterwards, put them in the chat here in Zoom. I am going to be doing my best to pick out some questions, and after the roundtable discussion part finishes today, to pose questions into the group. So again, please feel free to ask any questions that you've got in the Zoom chat. So without any other technical hiccups, what I want to do now is introduce Greg, who is one of the co-editor or guest editors of the issue, to share. And this is, Greg's familiar with all these events, but just to let everyone know, I did put him on the spot with Tina dropping out. So he's going to give his off-the-cuff remarks on what experience was like being a guest editor.
Thank you, Jesse. No worries at all. It was, I have quite a bit of experience into the publishing and communication industry, so it wasn't like a huge ask of me, but it was very insightful to see all those articles. And I've received the actual magazine here, so I actually have it. And if you haven't, I read the whole magazine cover to cover, and there is absolutely nothing weak. There's no weak stories at all. I probably have more information about this magazine than I've read into other books. So I'm still going through this book personally. That is a brand new book about service design. I found the Touchpoint magazine far more insightful personally. I was able to review, I think, like a dozen stories of the magazine. We've only kept, the best, so to speak, but there was a tremendous amount of content to go through and kind of like look at what is worthy of making the cut in the magazine. And the magazine could easily be double the size. There was a lot of great stories that was provided by editors from all over the world. Like this was truly a global issue, people from Japan and South America and Europe. A lot of really cool stuff. And what I liked the most, it was extremely applicable. There was not a ton of theoretical and academic information about it. This is what we did. This is how it was bad. This is how we pivoted. This is how we actually made it work. So if you have had a chance to read the magazine, this one is actually tremendous. This is probably one of the best magazines I've read in the Touchpoint series. As we all know, implementation is very much a problem in terms of service design, and going from the academia and to the practical has been a struggle for a lot of designers all over the world. So a tremendous amount of very applicable, very relatable frameworks, matrices, what we did. I think it's a tremendous magazine, and we talk about this leadership team, and we have to do a better effort at using the Touchpoint magazine as a medium, as a vector to get knowledge out into the community. So we talked with Birgit about potentially having those touchpoint subscription available to universities and design schools. Because this particular magazine is textbook. I mean, every student service design should be reading this magazine cover to cover. There's no doubt in my mind. So the experience was great. To get to Jesse's point, it was a bit harder on a global scale to kind of like get the first draft and go back into the platform. I'm not going to get into the detail, but there's quite a bit of work from the guest editor to review all those articles and give feedback, constructive feedback to the authors who may not be very used to write articles, right? So we definitely did a really good job at supporting them and saying, like, hey, what about this? What about that? What does this mean? Like personally, I was reviewing some stories from the UK, and they have some lingo or some terms that I wasn't aware of from the US. So it's like, what does this word mean? And they kind of like, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, that doesn't make any sense for somebody in Japan, for example, right? So tremendous amount of content, really useful information. I really hope you guys have a chance to read the magazine cover to cover, because I think it is literally its way of gold.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Greg, and thanks also for your involvement in the issue. Okay, what I'd like to do now is to begin our author presentations. We do have 4 authors with us. They are, as I said before, going to share the content of their articles. Keep any questions that you've got in mind, share them in the chat. At the end of the 4 presentations, we're going to have a discussion amongst the authors who are present and the guest editors who are here today as well. After that, for the last part of the event today, I'm going to pose some questions that you all have as the audience to the roundtable. So that's the chance for them to answer your questions and give them tough ones. Implementation's a tough topic, so I want to see some good questions to challenge them. I'm going to begin by introducing Shreya. Shreya is a lead service designer at Harmonic. She's a relationship-driven, multidisciplinary designer with an MFA in service design from SCAD. And she's interested in the intersection of service design with other practice areas and finding novel ways to infuse the two. Shreya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse. I'm going to share my screen. Just let me know if you can see it. Let's see, share screen. Let me know if I'm doing it right.
I can see it, yes.
Okay, can you see it?
Yes, looks good.
All right, perfect. Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon from Atlanta. Really happy to see a lot of familiar faces here. I see a lot of you who I know from before in the chat and in the participant list, but really honored to be here presenting, Kerry and I's article in this SDN Roundtable. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, as Jesse mentioned, my name is Shreya Dhawan. I'm the co-author of the article From Vision to Reality. A little bit about me. I work as a lead service designer with Harmonic Design, which is a service design agency based out of Atlanta. I've spent some wonderful 5-ish years at Harmonic, I would say, learning and growing my service design practice alongside some of the best in the service design community in the US. So been really lucky there to have spent that time. I do wanted to focus on why Kerry and I chose this topic and go to, tell you a little bit about the backstory. So Kerry and I were working, on different projects with different organizations and somewhat kind of seeing, similar patterns coming together. When you're working in a company, it's kind of, Harmonic is small enough to be able to have connections, within the practitioners and designers, but we started seeing a lot of similar challenges as we were talking, and we decided to come together and compare our notes. And when we did that, we knew we were onto something, and we realized that this is a topic that has been going on since a while, and it has a lot of value in the community. And if we have something that we can contribute to, we should definitely, look at it. So what I'm going to share here today is only a small part of the exploration, because there's only so much we can write in an article. But I assure you there is a lot of exploration that is happening outside of this as well. So in the next 7-ish minutes, what I want to do is I will share both of our learnings, and I want you all to leave this presentation feeling really energized and inspired to make a change. I want us to change our mindset towards implementation from being, from being reactive to more proactive. So just to go over a few key highlights from the article. So some of the key things that we discuss in the article are around importance of enhancing service performance, but just this whole idea of considering day one service implementation. And what that means is getting ready for implementation from the get-go, from day one, as soon as you get yourselves started with the service design process. This, as I mentioned, is a result of collaborative efforts with various companies that both Kerry and I have worked in the past, big and small. And what we observed is that many services fail to materialize because of lack of this early implementation focus. What we also discuss in this article is the importance of successfully turning service intent into service outcomes. And the last thing that we really emphasize on is understanding the as is, which is the current state of the organization, and looking at the to be state as something that we want to achieve. Oh, sorry, I guess someone got unmuted. No worries about that. So through this article, we basically did come up with two models that I'm going to be walking you through. They're not going to be in too much detail because we have time limitations, but I'm happy to answer any questions about that. One is a conceptual model to understand the various levels in an organization and kind of unpacking at which level service implementation might occur. And the other one is called the integrated implementation framework, which is basically focusing on these three levels, moving through the service design process, and what are some ways one could engage and start the implementation work right from day one. So firstly, I really like this piece that we added in the article, which is building on actually Tina's article that she had, written a few years back on implementation. What this visual highlights are some signals and identifiable behaviors that you may notice in your implementation work. So some of the easily identifiable ones include delay, complexity, and accountability. What delay means is there may be a delay between design and implementation efforts, which often causes deliverables to get outdated, teams losing focus. Sometimes there is complexity in integrating service design outputs with how the existing organizational practices, legacy systems exist. And accountability may materialize as misalignment or disconnection between different work streams that are working towards different goals or sometimes similar goals. So really just, calling out on some of these common hurdles that we see when one is transitioning from design to active implementation. It can often lead to misunderstandings and the evaluation of the design work. It is not easy, as Jesse mentioned, to be able to convert your design work into implementation and really move forward from there. In addition to this, organizations we see today often struggle with having inadequate measures, not having proper measurements to see if they're moving forward, unsupportive conditions inside the organization, and leadership disengagement. So moving on, I really find this article, this visual apt every time I look at it because, how it highlights many of the hurdles that I discussed in the previous slide. It shows the importance of how, we should be working together towards a common goal or an outcome, and not having alignment across individuals can cause things to get lost in translation, and they may implement concepts not in the same way across the board. So as you can see, it really did not work out when they were making the tracks. So this is the first conceptual model that I was talking about. So as you can see in this, it reminds me of an onion peel because you're kind of peeling off the layers of an organization. The bottom part of it kind of explains how it is important for service designers to understand the readiness at each of these three different levels. And what I mean by that is that between the levels of function, groups, and individuals. Like every organization may have all of these three levels. The readiness that exists for being ready for implementation may differ at each of these stages. For example, an individual may be more prepared for the implementation activity, but a group as a whole still needs to change. There may be individuals in the group that are more ready. What it also helps us understand is that services are deeply embedded within organizations delivering them. So for us to be able to push for service implementation, it is really important for us to understand these layers and these levels of the organization. And change is required at each of these levels so that we can integrate new service concepts effectively. Implementing a whole service mindset not only involves aligning diverse mindsets that exist at each of these different levels across this organizational structure, at the function level, group level, and the individual level. So just a few more slides here, a couple of them. This is the second framework that we kind of discuss here, and it is a bit complicated if you look at it first, but I can break it down for you to kind of understand what we are trying to emphasize on here. So I've called out some key areas that I want you to note. So at the top, you can see are the phases of the service design process. The names may differ depending on where you're working or how you kind of perceive it, but that's how we kind of call the service design phases at Harmonic. So that is on the top, it's kind of showing that. At the bottom, where there is a square that's basically like a circle that has I, F, and G, are basically the individuals, groups, and functions that I mentioned before. So what it shows is that at each of these phases, this combination of these three exist, right? And as you move from one service design phase to another, the orientation of them, as you can see, are changing. And what that means is that the readiness that each of these three levels are at is evolving and changing over time. And it's changing in a way that over time, by the time you reach the last stage of implementation and monitoring, you're at a level where you're at the highest level of implementation readiness. So that's what the basic the center part is showing. And at the bottom, what it's showing is different implementation modes. So as you're moving through the service design process with this idea of having day one implementation, how you're going to consider starting to think about implementation all the way from monitor and framing stage. And in that, in that phase, you're basically taking the mode of sense. You're kind of understanding what is happening around you. You're making sense of the different, practices, beliefs, and legacy systems that exist. And you're just gathering as much information as you can. Similarly, as you move forward in the process, you're engaging, activating, and eventually fostering. This is the second part of the same visual, which, as you can see, what it basically does is it breaks down activities that you can do in each of these four modes. So as you're moving from sense to foster, there may be some activities that you can take on to be able to make sure that you are, cultivating that idea of implementation right from the start. For example, you could be mapping relationships and alignment of organizational functions so that you can identify and understand the existing capabilities that exist for creating and delivering new solutions. Similarly, if you look at Engage, the one that I have highlighted, you could create an engagement plan and create some organizational profiles or function profiles so that you can understand who we're interacting with, how to best engage with them, and how to continue to push implementation efforts forward. Keep me honest on the time, Jesse. If I'm going above, just let me know. So this is my last slide, which is just talking about how do we know that we have alignment. So after you've done all of those activities, and these are examples, right? You don't need to do all of the activities that I mentioned, but it could be a flavor of those activities and just kind of making sure that you're priming your organization right from the start. But how do you know at the end that you have alignment? There are some signals that organizations can show at different levels that you have you have reached that state of readiness. Some of that include change being embraced. It is not feared anymore. Leaders and teams and individuals are all demonstrating a positive attitude towards change and understand that it's necessary. Some of the other ones include, alignment, fostering open, cooperative, and learning subcultures within the team. Others include having individuals that are committed to implementation and they have the necessary time, support, and resources to be able to do that. Having the adequate resources available at the right time, that is the key. Aligning with the demand for timely results. So you're timing it in a way that you have the right things available at the right time so that you can move in the pace that is desired. And some of the others include leaders understanding and actively engaging and supporting their teams and advocating for service design and implementation success. So here are some of the ways you can kind of start seeing and looking for signals to see if you have an organization that is ready to move towards implementation. And if not, hopefully use our framework that we've been working on to see if that helps you move things forward. Well, thank you. That was all.
Okay, thanks so much, Shreya. Now, again, I'd like to invite you guys to use the chat if you've got questions for people as they give their presentation. Let's move on then to Kata's presentation. Kata is a service design manager at Lærdal Medical in Norway. She has over 10 years of experience in service design in related fields such as organizational development, digital service implementation, and user experience design. In her international career, Kata thrives from impacting the health and lives of others with her efforts. Kata, please share your presentation.
Hi, welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for this nice introduction. And just like everyone else, I'm going to try to share my screen.
I'll let you know when I see it. Yes, looks good.
Great. So I think as you started introducing the round of speakers, I'm very, very glad to be here. This is actually my first Touchpoint submission and Touchpoint article that got out, and I'm very, very glad that I get to be here today and share a bit with the community about about some of our experiences around implementation. So that's just to put that out here. So our article has been co-written together with my colleague Robin Wittmeyer, who is actually a trained program manager. And we have been co-developing a digital transformation program for over 3 years and drove it together in the period between 2019 and 2022 in Lærdal Medical. And this article that we have published is discussing basically a few core frameworks that helped us to translate our vision of a holistic end-to-end journey into reality, mostly taking inspiration both from service design methodologies and frameworks and combining that with program management practices. So in this short overview, I'm going to highlight a few of these from the article, trying to not go too much in depth. And I'm very open to discuss questions later on. A bit about the context on Lærdal Medical. I'm not sure many of you are familiar with it, but we are located in Norway, Stavanger. Our core mission is helping save lives through offering products and trainings for healthcare education and resuscitation training. I have been working here for over 6 years now, mostly in service design and the latest 3 years as a service design manager. So Lærdal Medical is a very traditional product-led organization where we have a huge portfolio of mostly physical products, but also ranging a wide variety with digital and virtual training products as well. And being quite a legacy company, these products has not been designed with the customer journey in mind. So many of these offerings are disjointed and not really covering the customer experience as a whole. So the challenge is still up until today to how to transform at least parts of this into a experience-led service organization. So that's where my focus has been already from the beginning. So by 2019, the leadership recognized the need to offer a more holistic end-to-end digital experience, including digital services, but also to bring together the scattered touch points into a seamless and relevant journey across all products. So that was kind of our starting point of kind of establishing this program with my colleagues. So as a starting point in this transition, we have established an end-to-end customer perspective, a very visual representation of this holistic customer experience that covered and highlighted the key stages of this overarching kind of end-to-end journey from a customer's perspective. And it really helped to define our program, a holistic and overarching vision. So this blueprint was used extensively within the core team and also with the program board during strategic workshops, but also throughout many different discussions with team members, project members, group members. This helped us really to ensure buy-in when it came to mobilizing various work streams across the company. So we used this to run workshops and alignment sessions regularly, and it helped us to determine focus and priorities between initiatives of our portfolio. So this visual really helped us anchor the discussions and put the focus back to the customer's perspective. And when we zoom into it, then if I highlight one specific stage, in this case, the order and delivery stage, then basically we use this blueprint to really highlight needs from the user sides, needs from the business sides. This blueprint also features elements of a list of projects that were already currently running across different places in the organization, but also we listed potential future initiatives for each stage of this blueprint. We have kept track of sub-journeys that we mapped across each stage, and that helped us to understand the various stakeholders that were impacted and part of the various stages of the customer journey. So this really helped us to determine who we need to engage and at what stage of our work. So this blueprint had a lot of moving parts with a lot of complexity, as you might imagine. So our challenge with this was, oh my God, how do we simplify this? How do we bring this into reality and over to implementation? So that's where we brought in a framework that is called the POTI framework. And this is really a framework from program management. This stands for Process, Organization, Technology, and Information. So for each of the prioritized and selected initiatives from across the blueprint, we use this POTI to help and break down these changes into tangible work packages. So to illustrate this a bit better, I brought a specific example. So I hope this helps to understand a bit more. So for example, for one of our initiative, which was to provide an ability to subscribe to new digital products for our customers. How does this look like? So what are the processes that we needed to develop? So we needed to create new sales processes, as we have been primarily selling physical products previously. So we needed to define how will this look like for the sales organization and what kind of financial reporting process do we need to put in place to actually make it able to subscribe digitally. Also, we needed to create training for the sales team. So that meant the new processes that we had to develop. In terms of organization, we had to create a product team for organizing and for developing subscription sales touch points, and also to make sure that there is a backend transactional system so that we are able to transact these digital sales opportunities. And we also had to define the process ownership within the company. So all of these kind of work packages then landed under organization. And then when we looked at the technology, we realized that we had to procure a new tech platform to actually be able to handle subscriptions. So we didn't decide to build it from scratch, but then we had to initiate a procurement process for handling this technology. And lastly, in terms of information, we had already a CRM system in place, customer relationship management system, but we realized that we needed new type of customer information to handle for these digital subscriptions. So through this example, you can see how basically each initiative across this holistic customer journey could be then break down into very realistic and time-bound work packages that actually then can be moved into implementation. And lastly, what I would like to highlight is the organization model, because in order to sustain such a digital transformation, we needed to think long-term, and we needed to think about, okay, we are hiring people for short term, but this transformation is not for 2 or 3 years. This is going to stay here forever, kind of until, in brackets, forever. So as the program portfolio and the running initiatives grew by the years, we have started to transition towards a long-term dedicated organizational model. So at first, we managed to show progress with scaling fast by bringing on consultants, but over time, we transitioned towards this long-term and more stable structure. And eventually, this became a new business unit within the company. So we have established the journey-centered team model, where each cross-disciplinary team has ownership over a domain in the customer journey. So they are not owning a product, but for example, we have a team who is responsible for the holistic help and support domain, and they are responsible for every digital touch point where customers interact with Lardal for any kind of technical or user support related issues, including onboarding or even product education. So to enable long-term change across the organization and to help adoption across several digital product teams, we also chose a modular approach to almost all new touch points. And we call these the building blocks. So, for example, a building block included single sign-on or customer behavior analytics tools or a design system. So that was the underlying organization that supported the change for all the rest of Lardal, basically. So to summarize, I would like to highlight, I think, the 3 most important key elements, and to reflect back to Shreya, I think buy-in you mentioned and engagement over the organization as well, it was super crucial from the get-go. So without having buy-in from C-level and the stakeholders in place, this would have never happened. Also, we had to make sure that we keep engaging everyone from individuals all the way to the organization, and to keep transparent about our approach time to time. Finally, we really had to be value-driven, which means that we needed to deliver regularly, choosing kind of an MVP approach, so a minimum viable product approach, to keep this buy-in from the C-suite. So yes, this concludes in short the article. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kata. Now our third speaker is Alex Nisbet, and actually, like some of the authors have mentioned previously, just because there's one person representing an article doesn't mean necessarily that they were the only person writing it. I know Alex was one of several co-authors, as the other ones were, so just to give credit to some people that maybe not be on the screen, indeed the authors are sometimes a group effort. But without delay, Alex is here to talk about his work on behalf of DXW, where he's the head of service design. He leads their service design practice and supports their broader design team, and he's a familiar face with the SDN, having previously been on the leadership team of our organization. So Alex, it's yours.
Brilliant, Jesse. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me?
Sounds good, yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Now I'm just doing that thing of trying to, that's interesting. Let's do that again. Trying to share the correct
I'll let you
screen.
know when I see.
I think I've done it.
Yes, it's kind of your whole browser view. It's not presenter mode, but we can read the slides.
Okay, cool. Well, let's go with that then. So yeah, so Jesse, thanks for the introduction, and yeah, I would too like to thank my co-authors of Marianne Brearley, Joe Evans, and Isabel Seacombe, and together we're bringing our very hands-on experiences of designing and delivering services from design agencies, in-house design teams, and including UK government to this topic. So a tiny bit about DXW. So we're a leading UK employee-owned digital agency working within the public and third sectors. And we deliver our projects using the Agile framework, working in phases through discovery, alpha, beta, and live. Some of you might be familiar with that, I'm sure. And these phases ensure that government funding is spent well by requiring teams to validate that services are being developed with user needs in mind, which obviously makes sense to us. And using this approach, we've implemented a large number of successful services in the UK. Do have a look at the article if you haven't already, or go to our website for a bit more on that. Back to the article. As service designers, we might like to think that service design is all that's needed to deliver great services, but don't be silly, because of course that's not true. The truth is that implementation is very much a team sport, and we cannot be effective without collaborating, challenging, and even compromising alongside those we work with in often highly blended teams. And these can be teams up to 100 or more people strong. So it's no easy task. So implementation does come with its challenges from the moment a project is procured, to the prioritization of user and business needs, to navigating that lovely legacy technology, and of course the inevitable politics. But there are also huge opportunities, of course. Let's not forget that. In our experience, we service designers we've got to have that vision, of course, that we've been hearing already about, but also pragmatism, working within the boundaries of circumstance and systems so that we deliver value to the organizations and, of course, the people who interact with them. And I'm just going to share five things from the article. Firstly, before any of our teams are onboarded, government projects will have already gone through several stages to get that internal approval. Stakeholders have already had to prioritize and make a case for what they need funding for before procurement, before an agency is even selected. So us as a design agency has very little impact on this stage of the process. There may have been internal design teams working before we came on board, but not always. We may have been involved in a national strategy piece, but not always. It's the way that service design, if you like, and product design is actually purchased here in the UK at government level. The project itself may mean replacing that legacy tech, and the program can reflect existing structures and silos, which of course, as we know, is dangerous, or working on one stage of a bigger journey or in an ecosystem of different delivery teams responsible for a range of products and services, which again, we find is risky. So there are many issues to look out for because of these factors, but the bottom line is that we all need to work harder, but also accept that this is an imperfect situation that sometimes we can't do anything about, because as we know, designing public services is difficult, slow, and frustrating. That's a fact. Secondly, regardless of how that project does start, experiences must always be joined up, not only on the surface level, but also at technical and operational levels. Often there's always the possibility that strategy has been created by someone else outside of the program. Maybe they've left the department. Maybe the initial strategy has become outdated over the years that it took to procure teams to work on it. This demonstrates how easily things can become complicated and how quickly we might lose sight of what the service is really there to do. And this is where service designers can be influential in developing those better outcomes for users, which we're so famous for. But we do need to be focused, patient, and continue to work within our constraints. This enables us to continue to deliver value and maintain the trust of our dear stakeholders. Thirdly, I'm saying never stop adapting. Program governance requires us to work through specific stages of the project lifecycle from discovery all the way to live. But our experience of UK government projects often sees teams set up around specific phases and then being changed for the next phase, which can be very limiting when unknown unknowns are identified. This means that sometimes we need to be prepared to move to the next stage before we're completely ready, which clearly is frustrating. We should and we must empower ourselves to pause and ask more questions, easier said than done, of course, and run ahead and fill gaps in our knowledge so that the teams have what they need without slowing down development. Government projects don't always seem ideal, but life's like that, right? And so we need to be flexible in how we adapt. Now, one key way of adapting is, of course, by collaborating across the project team. So obviously, we work very closely with our fellow researchers, interaction and content designers, and with developers and technical architects, of course, which is what we'd expect, but also with performance and business analysts, product managers and delivery leads, and policymakers. That's not forgetting all the service users and actors themselves. And collaborating outside of the team across the larger program, if it's multiple products, which it often can be, and across the whole government department and the broader UCD community. So collaboration is certainly key, but with the sort of numbers of people that are involved, that itself can be a bit of a challenge. And lastly, across the agile stages, the closer we get to live, the role of the service designer can become a little less clear. Interaction and content designers are working on detailed design for release, but many things we want to affect at a wider service level may take longer to change. Excuse me. Working slightly away from production and its deadlines can afford us a luxury that our team members don't always have. So the time and the space to consider those gaps and opportunities, the before and after the digital products, the bigger picture, including those offline interactions that are often forgotten. And all of this, of course, helps support stakeholders with longer term and strategic decisions. To do all of this, one thing that we need to do is to tell good stories, good human stories, to influence stakeholders and to support those decisions. But also the opposite, in a way, is to know when to move on and wait for the right time. Be patient. Patience is a virtue. So, and just the way that we wrapped up the article, 4 things to focus on. During implementation, we've got to continue to do that thing that we're very good at, which is thinking critically and asking why, and being comfortable continuing to work to seize those opportunities and influence stakeholders for that long-term success. And doing this requires us to focus on 4 things. These are 4 human things. These are things about us. These are not things about frameworks. These are things about as much about our behavior as designers within implementation. So patience, accepting that conditions may not always be ideal. It's never a perfect world. Certainly for service designers, I think it's often imperfect. We have to make the most of that. Humility, be ready to take a back seat. So we're not always in the driving seat. We're not always the superhero at the front. Oftentimes we need to be patient at the back and let others come to the front. Resilience, our service mindset may be less welcome when product teams are under extreme deadlines and pressure. So if we talk about wanting to go off and solve sort of holistic end-to-end journey challenges, if our delivery team is focused on a particularly difficult feature to ship, they don't always want to hear what we want to say. And lastly, confidence in our intuition. We often won't be asked to do what's needed, so let's worry less about best practice and focus on what really, really matters. So in conclusion, when we recognize that the role of us as service designers needs to continually flex and that role sort of change, if you like, over time when working alongside others in the team delivering that service, and that when we maintain a mindset of active listening, watching and adapting in what we do, we'll continue to add value to implementation. There we go. Thank you. That's the end of my slides. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, now we've got one more talk from John. John is leading experience strategy and service design at Slalom in Detroit, and specializes in connecting the dots between business value, human experience, and the technologies that enable it all. He's a core member of Slalom's Global Service Design Center of Excellence and has 20 years of consulting experience, and got his slides up even before I finished. So, John, please, you can give your presentation.
Thanks, Jesse, and thank you to all the other speakers and contributions to the articles and the journal, which was wonderful to read everyone's thoughts, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. So we'll talk about the article that I co-authored with Julia and Naman, also experienced strategists in the Detroit office of Slalom, framework for connecting vision to value. So just a quick thing about Slalom, for those of you who don't know us, global professional services company, and we really focus on creating value at the intersection of business, technology, and humanity. So that resonates very well with us service designers who love to connect the dots between those things. And the other thing to emphasize here is that we really work from strategy to implementation. So all the way through working with and alongside our clients to not only develop strategies, but bring those things to life. Offices around the world. And so we're thinking at a scale that we want to be able to do this reliably and repeatably, which is where some of the motivation for the framework that we shared in the article comes from. So a quick overview of the framework, starting with a bit of the why behind it. So, we're in a competitive economic environment right now. Things are challenging in different ways all around the world. Clients need to show value from their investments, whether it's service design, technology, or anything else. And so we've found we've been able to be much more successful when we're very strongly anchored on the business value that we create. Again, whether that's service design or technology or anything else. So this mindset of thinking about value first and foremost is really kind of the driver of the approach. And the idea is that if our clients or the organizations that we serve are under pressure to demonstrate value, we as the service providers or the service designers, we need to get good at delivering value. And so that means reliable, consistent, at scale approaches and mindsets that work across any project, client, industry, or market. So this is kind of what we've been seeking to develop at Slalom, and what we think that the framework in the article helps us do effectively. So the central kind of concept from the article is this idea of the business value framework. It's how we identify, quantify, and realize business value. And it helps us do this in a way that's straightforward, accessible, and not dependent on any particular capability or discipline. And so it's inspired by service design thinking in the sense that we're thinking big picture, connecting dots, exploring lots of options, thinking about business experience, technology, and all of those things. But one thing that's actually special about this is that it doesn't depend on service design. It's not exclusively a service design framework. It actually works for anything, and we can apply it to any capability or project or industry like I talked about. And that's what has really made it work for us. So I think as service designers, our mindset and the tools that we use and the way that we think are inherent to the DNA of this thing, but we can share it with other capabilities, other disciplines, people who are not service designers, and they can still kind of apply this thinking effectively. And that's one of the things that has made it really stick and get traction. So what does it do? It helps us tell a simple, clear, visual story about how the work that we might do supports specific kind of business value, and how that value would support the future or the vision that that organization seeks to create. So it's really simple, at its core, it's a connect the dots, simple visual storytelling tool that helps us very deliberate about the way that we prioritize problems to solve, solutions to try, context to map. So helps us stay focused on value. It helps us prioritize based on impact, and it gives us a holistic mindset, much like we talk about in service design, an end-to-end journey or a surface to core mapping and a blueprint. This gives us another dimension of that end-to-end thinking, which we've been calling vision to value. And that's thinking about the desired future that an organization wants to create, but then also the value that is created through implementation in the real world when we do the work that we do. So that vision to value thinking is kind of a different dimension of that end-to-end mindset that service designers already know and love. And there's really three key elements to this that I'll just cover super quickly. There's the vocabulary or the terminology, a set of questions that go with each of the terms, and then the intuitive kind of visual mapping. So just sort of breaking it down. The vocabulary is first, and this just gives us a simple way of talking about the different pieces of the framework that are universal and easy to understand. So you could define these in different ways. You can fulfill them in different ways. You could even call them something different if you wanted to. But the idea is that we have a simple, well understood way of talking about different kinds of things that we're going to map on the framework, and it lets us have more efficient conversations. So that's the set of things that we currently use. And then each of those things is associated with a question. And so this is something that differentiates this framework from a lot of other tools and frameworks out there, which is that instead of having kind of prescriptive phases or deliverables or activities that we're going to go do, this framework is all based around the questions that we need to answer. And so, again, you could tweak the questions, you could have different words if you wanted to, but knowing that there is something that we need to understand, and these questions are interdependent with one another, so that the answer to one influences the thing that you would do to discover the answer to the next. That's the essence of this way of working, so that you can then answer these questions with any methods you want. You could use service design, you could use experience design, you could use cloud technologies. You could use whatever you want to do to answer these questions, but to keep the framework simple and straightforward, we focus on the questions as the essence of the framework, and then you can fulfill these in whatever way, your team or client or, personality suits. And then the third piece of the puzzle is this mapping. So the intuitive visual mapping of our answers to these questions. And so, it's never just one thing that you get it right the first time and you solve the problem and create the value and everyone's happy. We know all of this is iterative. We have to explore different things. We might explore different metrics. We might map different contexts. We might make different blueprints. We always uncover more opportunities than we can realistically solve. We always have more solution ideas than we can realistically test. And so having a visual way to keep track of all of the things that have been tried and considered and brought up by the stakeholders, the team, the users, gives us a really efficient way to tell the story, establish context with new people as they come in and out of the project, and compare apples to apples about different kinds of things that we're interested in addressing. So, for a given business outcome, we might look in different places in the business to find it. For a given service blueprint or experience, we might look for lots of different opportunities within that, but then there might be a different set of opportunities contained in another experience. And those opportunities might drive the desired business value differently. One might be a $10 million problem, and one might be a $1 million problem. And so, being able to compare the value of problems, being able to compare the feasibility of solutions all visually, it just has helped us keep track of lots of different things on lots of different projects in a way that business stakeholders can grasp very quickly, and also to keep alignment with the team. So it's really these three components: the straightforward language, the questions that help us populate the framework, and then the visual mapping to keep track of everything that's been going on. That's the essence of it. And then you can apply it in lots of different ways. So I've got a few quick examples, and this will be the last part, just to show you how we have used it in different ways. So here's the example from the article. This is more kind of in the coloring that we typically use, but this is the example that's in the Touchpoint article. It's a hypothetical example of kind of a smartphone leader that wants to reduce costs. So you can check the details out of that, or we could talk more about it later. But this is in the article, and it just kind of maps a few different ways that this client might have tried to reduce the costs through looking at different ways of measuring value, different contexts to explore, different opportunity areas, different solutions, until eventually you find something that works and you can track the impact of those changes on the metric that you care about, which in this case would be the cost of a key component. So that's in the article. This is a real life example that we did applying a framework, business value framework workshop to a client in a manufacturing industry to identify a proof of concept application for a generative AI intervention. We were able to use the framework to very quickly, align stakeholders from a bunch of different areas on a valuable problem to solve, and narrow in on a specific proof of concept to explore. Then we went and did that proof of concept, validated desirability, viability, feasibility. It worked really well, and now it's being sort of upgraded into a much bigger project that will be, eventually deployed in production with very significant impact. So this was a great example of going from a short workshop to something very real. This is just a tiny snippet of some of the working materials from the manufacturing story that I reference in the article. So this has been an ongoing initiative with our team for over 2 years, and we've used the framework to track all of our opportunities, all of our solutions, end-to-end implementation, and even the impact, the business value created by implementing certain things. So this is kind of a window into what it looks like to live this day to day, and this is what the team has used to prioritize our activities sprint to sprint for a very long time. We can also use it just to guide a discussion. So this is an example from a meeting facilitation that was just a few hours around some ideation with a client in the digital twin space. And using the framework to keep track of things that came up in the conversation, we were able to kind of narrow down on a couple of areas that merited further exploration, but also map out everything else that we covered in case we need to return to it later. So, this one was 2 years. This one was 2 hours. You can use it in a lot of different ways. And then the last kind of fun example is some of my co-authors and I, when we present about this publicly, which we've done a number of times now, we can't share the details of client projects, and that may have even come through in our article. We had to be very careful about what we said in the article. So we wanted to come up with a fun example that we could use to illustrate the concept with content that people might be familiar with or that we could talk about freely. So we actually took a plot line from season 1 of the FX show The Bear and mapped that plot line through the framework, and we were able to talk about that in detail. And we have kind of a fun presentation using that content as well. So lots of different ways to apply it, but it's an approach that's worked really well for us, and we wanted to share it with others in the hopes that it might help them too. So thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, John. That concludes the authors' presentations. What I want to do now is have a quick chat amongst the roundtable, that is the guest editors who are present and the authors. During this, I've got a couple questions to kick it off, which I'll pose to the authors. Then the authors and editors also can jump in with some questions. And in the meantime, if I've shared one question that I got in the chat that someone sent me directly that I'll pose, but please, if you have questions that you'd like answered, put them in the chat. I want to go back to our first presentation, which was from Shreya. And you had said that one of the most important things in getting implementation right was focusing on it in the very beginning. And I think often if you do a discovery project or discovery phase correctly and you're not thinking in solution mode, the idea of what you're going to build is not visible in the beginning. So might be a little bit of a paradox that if you don't know what you're building, how do you get ready for implementation? So what would you suggest people do to most effectively get ready for implementation if you don't know what implementation is going to look like?
So that's a great question, Jesse. I think we were constantly asking ourselves that same question. But I think the thing to focus on here is not what you are building, but basically thinking about the conditions where what you're building is going to sit within, right? Like I'm not saying that you should understand what capabilities will be needed, what exact changes will be needed to make that service concept come to fruition. But what you're trying to do is, similar to what Alex mentioned and Kata mentioned, that you are looking at the conditions. You're looking at the stakeholder engagement. You're trying to understand their appetite for implementation. You're trying to understand whether or not they are ready to be able to, be taken to a level where if this service concept fits, there isn't going to be any politics around it. There isn't going to be any pushback around it. So you're making sure that the conditions in the organization are ideal for your service concept to be implemented and not creating capabilities right from the start.
Okay, great. Kata, do you want to jump in?
Just a second, what Shreya was explaining about the conditions. So for us, for example, to have this program kickstarted at 2019, we had to go through 3 years of kind of suffering through failed projects running simultaneously across different parts of the organization, spending way too much money in things that did not fit well together. So at that point, it was already at the point where everyone felt like we have to do something about this, and this is the way we're gonna do it. So it's like really, you kind of sense it in the room that everyone is like, all the ducks are in a row.
Alex?
I just wanted to pick up on that point. So a recent significant piece of work that we won because the previous incumbent agency were unable to deliver anything. They were unable to deliver. And sometimes you win through failure, if you see what I mean. It's not an unknown situation. And to dive into that slightly more, I don't know if there has been a terribly unfortunate story in the UK the last year or so. It's been running for over a decade around the UK Post Office, where a company called Fujitsu had managed to get away with murder. Let's put it like that, to coin an unfortunate phrase. In actual fact, they were the incumbent that couldn't deliver for a piece of work that we've now won. And so our client was extremely frustrated that they'd spent a lot of money, a lot of public money, with nothing to show for it. And, oftentimes that, if you believe that you can make that difference and you can step in and you have to do things very differently, there is going to be a time when you're actually spending literally turning things around before you can then start delivering things. So 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, it feels like they're long timescales, but actually in the greater scheme of things, if you're certainly working at a central government level, those are kind of fairly normal timescales for things to change. Unfortunately, it's not an immediate overnight thing. I think I think we've generally got the impression that somehow digital especially can be very, very quick. You just sort of code something, what you see is what you get, and it's out there. In actual fact, I think the reality is the complete opposite. It's very slow and very deliberate and very extremely risk averse. I'm going to stop talking there because I think I'm just going on a bit now.
Thanks, Alex. I think that's a good bridge to a question that I've got for Kata and actually for John. Alex was just saying that public services may not be tangible, but still take a long time. John, I know the example in your article that it's based on is a big manufacturing client, right? And that's very different than, and Kata as well, you're working on medical products that are physical things with long prototyping and manufacturing and bug fixing and all of that. A lot of service designers work in non-tangible services, banks and things, but you're both in context, or at least John in that project, big manufacturing projects. What have you learned, both of you, and you can choose who goes first, in making the implementation of projects where the service experience has core components that are physical, that are products, successful, that people who are working in things like banks where it may not be as tangible can learn from? No, John, maybe I start with you. You're nodding vigorously.
Yeah, thanks. So it's an interesting place to apply service design thinking for us, because there are different layers of the service. So, if we think about in manufacturing, a physical object is produced, and then that object goes on to be part of a connected service ecosystem, right? But the way that that thing is produced is actually a service. And so I think a key insight for us on this initiative was that if we can think of something like an assembly line as a service and apply the service design tool set and mindset to that ecosystem, then we're able to kind of communicate about what's going on a lot more effectively and bring different ways of thinking to the table than we could if we thought about it purely as a technical process. Because there are, people process technology on premises, in the cloud, many different systems interacting, often legacy systems. It's really complicated. And so service design gives us the tools that we need to make sense of an environment like that and begin to make meaningful improvements that are based on value. What's going to make the biggest difference? Because you have a million things that you could do and you can't do all of them. So how do you decide, right? So that was an insight for us, is like, this is just a different kind of service that happens to create physical products, right? And that unlocked a lot for us.
Great, Kata.
Yeah, I think it's a super nice question, Jesse, and I'm glad that John took the first answer, so I got a bit more time to actually think about the answer. I think it took us now over 5 years to actually understand how we are designing intentionally the experience around these most complex physical simulators. And one of our latest example is a birthing simulator, where we actually designed the organization around this project in a way where we have the core experience of the physical birthing event, where we have a service designer just looking at the solution and the peripheries around that experience. So meaning the patient scenario and what kind of content is running on that simulator and everything around that moment. So looking at it as a time-bound experience. And then when we zoom out, then there is everything around that simulator, the digital components, how is it connected to the network, how are the things around this simulator is connected, and that's a layer above where we have yet another service design expert with industrial design background working on this holistic experience. And then we zoom out one more where we have another service designer with a team looking at the holistic experience of the educational and technical services. So how do we deliver this product? How is this product going to be understood by the customer? How will this be used? How are we going to collect data from this? All the way to make sure that there is analytics and learner data coming out of it. And then we zoom out once more, and then that's where we land on the holistic customer experience. And that's where sales comes in, that's where order and delivery comes in, and that's where kind of the help and support bubble comes in. And then we have yet 2 other service designers representing 2 other projects. So it's like kind of layered approach, and it again took us 5 years to explain, get buy-in, gain buy-in, and basically build our service design organization so that we have the capabilities to work this way. So time, time is the answer.
No, that's great. And in fact, I thought it was very interesting to see in your presentation that you were taking this customer journey approach. And I can imagine an organization like Laerdal, if you said 5 years ago to them, would they be working with customer journeys and service designers, they would have never guessed it. So the fact you got there is, yeah, I hope it's testament to that you've taught them the value of service design. Maybe one more question from my side, and then I see 1 or 2, 3 questions coming in that I can ask from the audience. And this one is actually for Alex. You talked about in the public sector, the services being quite difficult, slow, and frustrating to work on. And that sometimes the preparatory work was done long before you've joined. So that puts you in a difficult position if Shreya is saying, look, to be really successful, you need to be involved in the beginning to know what implementation looks like. So with your public sector service designer hat on, what can you tell service designers working more in the private sector about how you achieve that success when the beginning phases of a project may well have been done outside of your control, outside of your hands?
Yeah, and listen, I don't want to paint an overly bleak picture. I guess that when it's public money at stake and you're talking about a rather, shall we say, conservative with a small c and a big C government who don't like being told what to do, or don't like to hear that they might not be right all of the time. There is a tension there, isn't there, between an agency wanting the work, because that makes sense, and wanting to do good work, and the sort of the commercial necessities of being in business. So I think we can often be caught in the middle of sort of seeing that there's a very good piece of work to be done, a good piece of policy to be delivered, or a good outcome to be delivered. But then the kind of internal politics, if you like, with a small p, that go along with it. Like I say, it's not easy. But I do think that it's not impossible to build a rationale for to kind of take a step or two backwards. Oftentimes, I think that the value in that becomes apparent as you're working along, if you like. You can, yeah, I think a good working relationship is very key there. Good sort of honesty, if you like, proving your proving the value that you can deliver. We've got a sort of a saying, which is do good work, tell good stories. So that's about being honest and just, doing the good work. And as you do that work, as you demonstrate your abilities, then people can see the value in what you're doing, and then maybe open up a wee bit. I have a sneaking suspicion that, I mean, I'm sure you've been in that situation where a client has asked to see, evidence that you've worked in this sector, or evidence of your skills and capabilities of working with particular user groups, if you like. They want to see your credentials, and they want you to prove that you can indeed do what you say you can do. I actually think we should, the shoe should be on the other foot. We should demand to see the work that the client has done up to this point. We should demand to be able to see their strategy. We should demand to be able to understand how capable their teams are, and how used to change, because of course all design is change. I think oftentimes we're the ones that are having to jump through all the hoops, whereas I think actually, arguably, I think our clients, and I use that term very extremely broadly, should be prepared to jump through those hoops as well. I hope that I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Alex. So there was someone who sent me a question. I put it back in the chat. They had to leave and send it to me at first individually, but I liked it, and I think it touches again on something that Shreya talked about in the beginning, about how you create the right conditions for implementation success, and that's focusing on it in the start. And their question at the second part of it was, how do you become an advocate for the conditions or the capacities needed to become implementation ready if people don't see that as important? So basically, how are you impressing upon people the need to think about implementation from the beginning if they might just be getting Slack up and running and setting up meeting schedules and starting research, for example?
I think that's a great question again. I think, I mean, in the clients that we worked with, I think what we have seen is like, being a consultancy, you always want to be able to evaluate those behaviors right from the start, right? Like you would take on service design work when you know that there is value understood of this work, right? So you can get ready for implementation of that service design work when you know that you have that support, that advocacy from the start. So I think within our framework, what we have discussed, and you will see in that last visual that I shared, as you move more and more towards the actual implementation, your activities get more time consuming, and they require you to spend more time and effort in terms of getting the right people in the room, creating those conditions, having the right conversations. What we're saying is not exactly that, okay, involve everyone right from the start, be in these, long meetings and workshops where you're talking about what you're going to create 6 months to a year from now. But what we are saying is start having those conversations, right? Start meeting with those stakeholders to understand what their mindset is, where they're coming from, what value is it going to bring to them. I think a lot of people have a lot of personal stake in what they are advocating for. Like if I don't see, as an employee, if I'm working in a company, if I don't see value in it personally, on how it helps me in my work and how it pushes my thinking forward, sometimes people are going to resist. So you're trying to basically understand the landscape that you're working in so that you can design your activities in a way that, and going back to Alex's point, I really like the fact that he mentioned adapting continuously and constantly, because none of these activities that we have mentioned, that's why they're reading a little bit high level and vague, because it is on your interpretation and it is on your contextual conditions that you're working with. You're going to evolve them. You're going to make them more, again, contextual to your problem, and work through it based on what is given at you.
Anyone else want to jump in from their perspective?
I can add a little bit more. I think for us, again, it comes back to communicating the value that will be created, as a carrot, if you will, to help people kind of get excited about the implementation to make it real. Because without implementation, nothing changes and there is no value created. And so I think, we're very big on pushing that part as early as possible. And I think to get back to the earlier question about, service design in a physical, intensive environment, that required a lot of early testing to validate that some value was really being created. And so I think whether you're in a physical, intense physical environment or not, this idea of how can we demonstrate some amount of value as early as possible, that helps to build the momentum for implementation, because then people see like, oh, this isn't just another slide deck, like this is actually doing something, this is working. How can we get more of that? And so I think the more quickly we can validate that some real value or change is being created, that changes the conversation around what it means to implement, because it's not just, getting your ducks in a row to be implementation ready. It's, oh, this is actually helping me now. I want to invest more in this.
Alex.
Yeah, and I think that really nicely speaks to the point about collaboration with performance analysts, business analysts, to figure out how we might assess and measure how well those services are performing. Because I think my sense, certainly in the UK, seeing that the importance of demonstrating impact and value down to almost like pixel level is so critical, and makes a difference to share prices, makes a difference to the value of the economy if things are the better that things are performing. And so we don't just need to be adept at doing good work and telling good stories, but we also need to know how to speak the language of our clients, of our clients' finance teams, of our clients' investment teams, and understand what really matters to them, as much as we pride ourselves in understanding what matters to our service users. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to be very skilled and adept with our left brain as well as our right brain, if that makes sense.
Yes. I want to ask one question, which I think, and maybe this would be our last one given time, although there are some other great questions in the chat. And it seems to make sense to talk about implementation and to pick up on a question that Aaron had for what follows implementation. So he was asking a little bit, what is the service designer's role for after post-implementation? Is there a role? I think we can say that there would be a role. Service designers should not drop off at the moment our work is done creating things like blueprints. But I want to ask anyone, editors or authors here, and probably just time for one or two of you to give a quick answer. What does the role of a service designer look like after implementation? Please just jump in.
I think I might have responded to that great question actually in the chat, but now I can't see it. So I'm going to say it's certainly one of the things that we do is to, and this is before products are delivered or services anyway live, is to set up programs for the operational team, so the client team, to be able to assess and monitor how well that service is doing, how it's performing against outcomes, and how it's. I know we were talking. Kata was talking about sort of customer journey management. So you're breaking down that overall end-to-end journey into a series of sub-stages and identifying the outcome for each of those stages, and then how well is the service performing again, to deliver those outcomes. I think that's and therefore, if something's not performing very well, what kind of, creating some kind of triage program in order to identify, is it worth us changing something? Can we change it? Have we got the money and time and that, aptitude to change it? So I think those are some very kind of positive things, and it speaks to that point of that a service is never perfect, it's never done, it's never finished. Unlike that physical product, arguably the tooling that's involved in manufacturing a spoon is quite a lot, and you don't really want to kind of mess about with it too much. Maybe a spoon's not a good example, but I think you know what I mean. The whole idea about a service is that it's changeable. You can improve it continually, and I think service designers need to make the most of that characteristic, I guess you could say.
Great. So yeah, indeed, though, I had also missed the answers in the thread there. Kata, you didn't put an answer in, but if you have a few seconds to share your response.
Yes, so I would just like to second Alex. I had the same thought. I don't think our work is ever finished. So to me, that is kind of the key here. I don't see implementation as the last stage. I see that as a kind of start of something new. That's where we start to evaluate, measure, and evolve. So we kind of try to stop looking at it as a linear process and look at it as like a circular process of design.
Okay, I do want to end kind of on time, so just a few quick announcements from me. First of all, I want to thank everyone who is involved in the issue. I know some authors who are here present in the audience and didn't have a role. All the authors, the guest editors who are here and who are also not able to be present, thanks so much for making this issue possible. Birgit, who's been present, and Carolina from the SDN, who does a fantastic job as pulling Touchpoint together. Touchpoint, and I've got a copy of it here. Someone else had, Greg showed it in the beginning of the call. This is a member benefit for the SDN. If you're a paying member of the SDN, you get this copies for free, and you can read it online for free. If you are not a paying member of the SDN, I'd encourage you to check out the issue. You can also buy access to it as a PDF or in print as well. We are busy with our next issue of Touchpoint, and that's on service design and AI. Super interesting topic. I look forward to a roundtable on that, and the articles are just coming in the coming weeks, and it's something we should have published in about a month and a half or so. Thank you everyone for attending this event. I hope you get a chance to read the copy that we've been discussing, and I hope to see you at a future roundtable as well. Have a good evening or rest of the day, wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.